Welcome to another edition of Jack in the Booth. I'm Jack McShane. Now our guest this week is Dan Savarino. Dan is an instructor at the Hofstra Sports Journalism program where he works with young broadcasters. Now I should know I was one of them a few years ago. And coming up you'll hear his thoughts on some hot topics in the news, but we started with the program itself, and I asked him about some of the pros and cons of conducting virtual classes during the coronavirus pandemic.
Hard questions right away. Now, we last year started talking about this, and there was some pushback on it, and I said to Mike, I'm telling you, there's a plan here, something we can do virtual. There's definitely a market with kids out there who could get a critique from us or from something else. We never really reached into it a little bit more because we were saying, you know what, if need be, we'll get to that point, but we don't really need it right now. So when everything started to happen, we started doing those free classes where it was just like a free time to talk, and people would start, chatting with us in March. It was, those first couple of weeks, it was tough. Everyone was home from school. We wanted to do something nice and something for us to do. That turned into, let's develop a program a little more. And we kept talking about it. We had a ton of Zoom meetings. Kevin and I and his wife once on a random Saturday just chatted for an hour thinking of a plan that we can bring to then Mike and Keith and Vinny, and we all talked about it, and it blew up. Jack, I've never seen this kind of enrollment. We've done so well and
reached a bunch of people from around the country, right?
Oh, country, world.
Really?
World, yeah. I have a kid in my class tonight who's from Mexico. He's bilingual.
Wow.
I had a student in my class last week who was from the Netherlands. He was just hanging out in France, though, on vacation because, that's what they do over there. It's really cool. But he is another really good student we have. All our kids are great. And we, from the start, had kids from North Carolina, and I thought that was so cool. Some kids from Jersey who have taken classes with us and have said, you know what, it's hard for us to come back sometimes all the way to Long Island, but we try and do maybe one or two classes if they can. Now we have all of them. It's them. A girl from Massachusetts, Talia, who's been awesome. A student from Chicago. We have multiple from California who are waking up at 6:30 Pacific time just to be in the class. That's
how do these people find out about it? Is it you guys just promoting it well? How do you guys promote it?
I honestly don't even know because
really?
Yeah, because we don't have a commercial out there.
Right.
Some people have said through social media has helped.
Mm-hmm.
We do okay with our social media. We obviously could do a lot better, but we do, okay with our social media. We put together our own stuff and we kind of push it out there. And then I guess people searching stuff to do, and you look up sportscasting, are one of the first ones to come up, or some sports broadcasting for teens or whatever. And we're one of the first to come up, and it's really worked out. And I think that's been the coolest part of it, to have all these students from around the country be able to meet with each other. And we're still, I think, putting on almost the same kind of product as we would. There's some things obviously you don't get. You can't get the stand-ups. You can't get that personal touch of me telling you, okay, well, now sit up a little more. I can't really do that.
Right.
Zoom, but there's a lot of other skills that we can get from it. I think that's awesome.
But you try to compensate it as much as you can, because you don't want to have these kids be at a disadvantage not being, in person. But like you said, with technology these days, kids can just, call a game off a monitor, which is kind of the way that professionals are even doing it now. So yeah. I think that probably helps them, right?
You're right, Jack. That's exactly what we're doing. And we started seeing Zoom from the beginning, and I said, listen, we can do almost every one of these classes. The only one maybe we can't do is producing and editing, because I can't have a student edit and teach them.
Right.
So we changed that to something called show creation. So now they just still do the show, they produce it, but Kevin or I will edit it afterwards. That's where it changes a little bit. They just lose that one little dynamic, but everything else has worked. Play by play, share a screen. Okay, sometimes maybe it lags a little bit, so we try and match it up. We're still
that can happen in real life.
Exactly. And we're still trying to get it as close as possible. And it's, again, working with those skills. TV anchoring is going on this morning. It's going on right now with Kevin and Keith at the moment. And, they're practicing TV anchoring. Roundtable's perfect for this. Radio hosting, perfect. My research and prep class I've really gotten into. Interviewing has been awesome. They get double the interviews because now it's 2-hour sessions over a course of 4 days instead of 1 8-hour session. So now they're getting 4 to 5 interviews. That's awesome. They're getting more out of it. We're working harder, but we're loving every minute of it.
Yeah, interviewing is easy. Like we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Now, I want to transition to some of the, big topics in the news a little bit. There was the story yesterday out of California that the California Interscholastic Federation said that they were going to be delaying the start of high school sports until December and January. Now, this obviously impacts, a ton of people, specifically athletes that are maybe seniors that are trying to have a bigger year before they go to college? Because I know there's been people on social media that are trying to use that as a way to recruit. What do you think some of the challenges are for some of these kids?
Well, social media works in a lot of areas where there are kids who never would have gotten recruited who were around like my age or even younger, and now they haven't have a chance. Now you can put out the same kind of reel, and shout out to my boy Jared Veluzzi, who of course we love. Jared does also a good job helping promote them too, who's another just high school kid who's trying to, make it himself. So there are ways with social media that can be noticed by this coach, where in the past it used to only be you have to be really good to get recruited there, or you have to have a good high school coach or AAU coach, whatever it is, to call up and know someone. It's not the case anymore. You can see video anywhere, and you can see their intangibles, and then you can start getting into more in that recruiting process. I'm not as worried with that with the high school athletes. What I'm more worried about is I use examples here like in New York, right? So wrestling is going to end up getting hurt. Football could end up getting hurt. Think about Long Island, Garden City alone. Garden City's football team, amazing football team for years, and they're going to be fine at the end of the day. I think they will if they end up playing a spring season. But half of the kids on the football team play baseball or lacrosse.
They're multi-sport athletes, right? Exactly. That's the big issue.
And most of them are going to end up playing lacrosse maybe in college or baseball in college, or they got signed already and they have a verbal commit. And
so they're going to have to pick now.
Yeah, that's going to be the hard part. That's where it's going to hurt athletics overall, I think. I think that's going to hurt more students and more student athletes from being able to participate in a sport. And now that team either will not be very good or they just won't be a team anymore. The lower level teams aren't going to have it. I have a friend who's a wrestling coach. He's like, I'm going to have my one stud kid who's a wrestler. He knows he's a wrestler. I lose every football player. I lose every lacrosse player. I lose every baseball player. Every kid he knew that would still come out because they're athletes and they want to just work on their footwork, or they liked wrestling, they like being on the team. He goes, I'm not going to have them this upcoming season if this plan is in place. It's going to hurt people, and it stinks. But you know what? We got to keep everyone alive too. I think that's kind of important also. I think it's no matter what, there's always going to be a lose-lose situation here.
Yeah, because, the health and safety is obviously the number one concern. Now, for the school's perspective, do you think it would be smarter for them to just cancel the season as a whole, like all the fall sports season, so there's no overlap, or do they have to push it into the spring?
It's a tough one. I was just talking the other day to someone about this, and again, I can't really –
can they afford to?
That's the thing. It's money, right? Everything comes back to money and liability. Why can you have these travel teams play all summer? Right now there's kids playing every single day with no masks on and very few spectators.
Football's harder with Corona. In terms of transmitting it, as opposed to, like lacrosse or something.
Yeah, and even some of the wrestling, forget about wrestling. Soccer, you're right on top of everyone too. There's going to be those sports you just can't play with that. And I don't know. The problem is, yes, we know students and those kids will most likely be fine. We don't know the implications in 5 years of them if they do get it, but they live with parents. They live with grandparents. They see their family. They got the teachers coming into the schools, which is obviously another debate. I understand the liability issue with that, where school doesn't want to take that on. And I can understand that. All colleges have already started to shut out their falls. CAA, Hofstra, they're done. The local colleges around here, Delphi, Malloy, their leagues, they're done. I was just talking to them recently, and they knew it was coming. They're planning to double up maybe everything in the spring, which looks like the case for everybody. Everyone's gonna double up in the spring. That's gonna be hard on staffing for them. That's gonna be hard for the
like
athletes.
Facility openings even.
Yeah, that's getting time, and depending on the sport, if you don't have a good facility, it's gonna be really hard. So I don't know. With a lot of these high school kids, I get a little concerned with some. I feel like they're going to lose that opportunity to get to that next level. And at the same time, maybe it could be the best thing possible. Maybe you do take that gap year and you explore yourself and you realize if you really want to play or not. And then if you do, then you do. I don't know. It's hard to kind of say, let's just cancel the whole thing, because we know at the high level how much money goes into it and how much money gets generated from it. I think that's the difficulty of it.
And we could see some athletes, I know I see a lot on social media, a lot of them doing like individual workouts and to be able to put out like a highlight tape if they miss a season, right?
Yeah, and we see that all the time. That's just the power of social media. People TikToking their highlights now, which is kind
Right.
of funny. It cracks me up because I'm thinking of like a 40, 50-year-old coach looking at this.
Right.
What
They
the
may
heck
not
is
be
this
looking.
thing? Yeah, for them, and they just learned Twitter, and they're like, okay, now what's this thing? Like,
Right.
that part is kind of funny, but that just shows you the change in the world, in media, in how we interact. So think about people working remote with Zoom and school with Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it is. And I think that's really cool alone. But I think that these kids have a pretty good platform now where they can still promote themselves. I think that helps. And I think that may put them on the radar, and then putting themselves on the radar, then you reach out to that coach, and the coach can either give good words of approval and hopefully not any bad ones if they like them.
Now, I want to transition to professional sports here. I'll start with the NHL. Yesterday, the NHL announced that they only had 2 positive coronavirus cases. And the way they're doing it is they're having 2 hub cities right now in Toronto and Edmonton. Now, I want to kind of compare that to like a sport like baseball where everybody's been planning on playing in their own stadiums. Now, do you think either plan is better? Because the NHL, the statistics show that it's definitely working.
Personally, I think the bubble plan in the NHL or hub city plan, whatever you want to call it, for the other sports we've seen, I think is better. It's kind of hard to compare to soccer, of course, overseas. The Bundesliga, did a great job. Premier League has done a great job. But you can't compare to those countries because, first of all, their cases went down. Second of all, they don't have as many people in those tiny areas. And I think they also do a better job. Personally, I think that everyone cares about each other a little bit more in different areas. That's just my personal opinion from what I see and when I've been over to Europe. But anyway, I digress. I think here in the United States and even going up to Canada, I think the hub city works so much better because you are keeping that confined. But I think the double testing, the making sure you don't have that false negative, pushing them away right away and making sure everyone's quarantined for 14 days, that does make a difference. I really do think it does. And I'm not saying that Major League Baseball doesn't do that. I just can see it being a higher risk. But at the same time, Jack, you got to remember, these professional athletes are all traveling together. So they're not going to put them in a random airport and say, fly out of LaGuardia and go down to D.C. now. No, they're going to take their private plane. They're going to be down with their team. They're going to be in a hotel that they're the only people there. They're going to do it the right way. So I don't know if we could really say one is better than the other. I think no matter what, if someone gets it in a league, it's going to be spread in the league regardless. I think that's just how it is until they contain it as much as possible. I don't think it's going to be one and then all of a sudden 50 people are going to get it. I think that they do a good enough job of containing things with the testing and making sure that with close contact. The only thing I am worried about is how guys are going to lose time. You're going to have to sit 14 days. That's going to completely change the dynamic.
Oh, right, if they get the virus.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe it's a little bit more of a benefit towards the MLB that they're able to play in their home stadiums. I guess it kind of gives the players a little bit of comfort. But does it really matter considering there's no fans?
I guess that doesn't. The only problem with Major League Baseball, the Major League Baseball plan is that they do come home with their families. That's, right. I think, another big issue of that. So now you have to really be strict with your family and hope that every staff member is very strict with their family too. Making sure you don't have that random, aunt or uncle or grandparent who's coming, who's not living there already. That is a difference maker. And I think that is where the MLB plan is, I don't want to say weaker, but I think that's the one concern I have with the MLB plan versus the NHL plan or the NBA bubble, even though all those guys are complaining about having a decent meal in a box. So that's beside the point.
NBA bubble, they're not interacting with their family, right? So it's a little bit.
No, not at all. That's the tough part over there too. And they're complaining about it. And I understand that. It's a tough decision to make. You leave your family for a long period of time, but I think that sometimes the athletes forget that their presence makes a difference in the rest of the world too. I think that they forget that by them playing, that's generating now revenue, which can pay for TV, which pays for sponsorship, which turns into a bunch of more jobs and lets people get laid off. I don't think people realize how many levels it goes down. I think that's something that we forget about.
Now, I want to talk about specifically about the NHL, the format that they're using for the restart, where they have this qualifying round where some teams are actually getting rewarded for having the opportunity to, progress in the Stanley Cup. Like if you look at a team like Montreal, who's the 12th seed, and some of these teams, like even the Rangers, who are the 11th seed playing the Hurricanes in the first round of the qualifying, and the Islanders too, should I mention. who are also the 10th seed and wouldn't have been in the playoffs if it was a normal finish to the season. What do you make of the format, and do you think it is fair to all teams?
I think no matter what, there's always going to be people that are going to complain about this. And I think that at the end of the day, that's just how it is. I've been very back and forth on it. Like I said, if I was a fan of this team and let's say the Rangers or Islanders won the cup, okay, think about how many times the fans are going to torture each other that it's not a real cup.
Right.
But at the same time, it's probably harder, okay? Like it's going to be really, really hard to win this thing because first of all, it's going to come down to who conditioned the most during the offseason. Who was prepared and mentally prepared the most for this, which alone is a big deal. So you might end up having a team like maybe the Islanders or Rangers who have been so locked in, driven, focused, and you might have a team that maybe, I don't want to say the Bruins and throw them under the bus or something. Let's say the Bruins, who are one of the top teams in the league this year, maybe they didn't take it as seriously over the last couple of months. Maybe they're mentally not into it the same way. Now you're going to have all these upsets. Add into the fact, and I think it was Chris King who brought this up about a month ago. We were talking about this, and he came on one of our classes, and we were chatting. He goes, imagine Barry Trotz having 3 months to prepare for an opponent. Like, that's insane. It really is.
Right.
These top coaches, it's going to be really, really hard to win, and they even know it. You have to win a best-of-5 series? Come on. You know, the NHL in general is a coin flip a lot of times.
It is, yeah.
It's going to be sloppy play from the start. I think we all know that. Think about when guys start in, September and October, the first couple of weeks of preseason and the regular season. It's sloppy. It's going to be interesting.
Now, speaking from like an announcer's perspective, Brendan Burke and Butch Goring and Chris, they're obviously going to be doing the games. Do you think it presents probably a big challenge for them considering that they're doing, 82 games a year or about that? But sometimes they're national TV games, but they're filled with fans and they really work off the crowds, and now they won't have that. What challenges does that pose? Because I know you do high school sports with smaller crowds, so maybe you would have a better perspective on that.
Yeah, and some colleges with no fans. I'm going to be honest. It's or sometimes you don't hear the fans at all. That stuff does make a little bit of a difference. I think they're professionals. I mean, they're the best in the business. Let's be real. I mean, they are there for a reason. They know what they're doing, especially those play-by-play broadcasters who have done it for so many years and understand exactly what it is. But if you ever talk to Brendan Burke, and you've met him before in our class, came last year too, and he is so into, I don't want to say the X's and O's, but I guess it's a strategy of broadcasting. I guess we kind of the way of looking at it, of how he uses his voice, how he plays off of this, how he thinks so much into every single call, which not everyone does that. It is impressive when you listen to him. But he, for example, I think it's going to be fine. I think that's going to be completely all right. There's going to be the guys who called all of the, Olympic games, and a lot of them did not do it on site. A lot of them did it from the studios up at NBC. And the NBC studios, of course, in Stanford, which basically they're sitting like this with a bunch of monitors everywhere from different angles, and that's it. That's how they're calling the game.
It'll be easier for them, you're saying? I
think those people are going to be easier for them because they've been used to it before. You've had Keith Irizarry on, who, of course, one of our program coordinators. He used to call games of like KHL hockey and Chinese basketball out of a studio sometimes. Him and Ed Cohen and a few others. That was a cool experience for them. It said it's different. You don't get that same feel, and you don't know exactly what you're looking at the next picture sometimes. But I think that part is going to be a little awkward at first. I think they're all going to be fine. They're professionals. You still know exactly the feel of it. The fan part is going to be weird because you usually feed off the crowd and your voice level. So I'm going to be interested to hear some people's goal calls without any fans.
Well, I'm thinking like Chris King, if the Islanders scored an overtime goal, I mean, the whole bench will hear him screaming when they win a game.
Yeah, Chris will definitely enjoy every moment of that. But I think –
especially if they win the cup, I mean.
Oh, forget about it. But I think that would be the cool part of it all. I think there will be ways to work around it where I think you start to adjust it as a broadcaster.
Thanks to Dan Savarino for joining us. Now, if anyone wants to learn more about the sports journalism program at Hofstra, go to hofstra.edu and search Sports Journalism and Broadcasting Institute. Thanks again for watching. I'm Jack McShane.